Good evening and thank you for joining us. Parents and school officials at Hammersholt High School are getting ready to meet tomorrow night to discuss the anonymous threats being made against the school.
Now, the session isn't just for asking questions. It's a chance for the school community to come together, according to the school council chair. Meanwhile, students were able to attend class today for the first time in a week. With more on tomorrow's meeting, here's Ryan Benazzo.
The chair of Hammersholt School Council says members of the school community need to lean on one another in the wake of the now near daily threats.
We're all in this together. Nobody has ever been through a scenario like this before.
And Sherry Lappage believes parents and students need an outlet for their frustration.
A lot of times just that joint experience and being able to say, yep, we're frustrated, we're right there with you, that helps a lot.
That, she notes, is one of the main reasons school administration and the council want to hold Thursday evening's meeting. Of course, they'll also field questions alongside school board officials. And a detective with the Thunder Bay Police Service will also be on hand to disclose what he can.
Obviously, he's not going to be able to give details of the investigation, but there are pieces that he can speak to, and he will be taking questions back as well to the police. So we're very happy that they have agreed to join us.
With so many threats leveled against the school, Lappage says there have been conversations regarding what to do if a threat is called in ahead of that meeting, and they're prepared for the possibility.
We have a contingency plan in place. We will also have officers in uniform on site. We will not announce the contingency plan until it is needed, but there is a contingency plan. This meeting will happen.
That alternate location, if required, won't be made public until 6 o'clock Thursday evening. Ryan Benazzo, TBT News.
Hundreds of residents from Kashechewan First Nation could be evacuated to Thunder Bay next week. The city's been asked once again to host residents from the community, which is about to be hit with major flooding. The Kashechewan residents will have less than a week to move out of their community and find higher and drier ground, as evacuations are expected to start on Monday. Thunder Bay could see about 250 guests as early as April 18th. The city's hosted evacuees from the James Bay community numerous times in the past. Deputy Fire Chief Greg Hankio says it's his understanding that water and ice conditions there are currently stable, but they're expecting big flooding again this spring.
For our purposes, what we've stated is that we want to receive primary evacuees, so that would be vulnerable populations, children, elderly, things like that, with the understanding that in many cases that particular demographic would have some support people coming along with them. So again, for Thunder Bay's purposes, that's what we've requested. It's my understanding that they want to evacuate almost the entirety of the community.
The city has an agreement with Indigenous Services Canada, which means the evacuation will come with no financial cost to the municipality.
The future of the region's energy grid was the focus of today's Northwest Ontario Regional Electricity Forum. The event was hosted by the Independent Electricity System Operator and included municipal, First Nation, and industrial leaders. The goal is to bring parties together to provide input on regional needs from an electrical standpoint. Adam Riley reports.
It's one of the more pressing issues in the Northwest alongside employment, housing, and Indigenous relations, electricity. For many communities, it's a lifeline, and for others, it's the one thing preventing them from economic prosperity. During a panel on regional and local energy planning, panelist Vicki Blanchard says there's not just a bottleneck of power, but a lack of additional power in her community. She says it's concerning that she has to tell government officials and potential investors of that impediment.
My job is to attract commercial industrial business, and when you're limited with only 5 megawatt, that's not a lot of power. So we are definitely in a situation. Some of the bottleneck is through a submarine cable that we could upgrade, but the cost of that to a small community of 5,500 with no commercial industrial tax base is difficult.
However, Blanchard is optimistic about a possible biomass project and the potential opportunity for Sioux Lookout to tie into the Wataynikaneyap power line, which was given the leave to construct last week. Red Rock Indian Band Chief Matt Dupuis also spoke on the panel. His community is a key player in the east-west tie transmission line, which is slated to start construction later this year. He says it's great to see First Nations, municipalities, and industry come together, but that's not often the case. He adds sometimes it takes too long to start beneficial projects.
There's a lot of exploration going on in the area, and we need to know exactly what's going on, what their usage is going to be, so that we can start planning ahead. Sometimes we take too much time in planning and not enough time in implementing these plans, because by the time we get these plans mobilized, sometimes these projects fall offline because it's not feasible for them to connect in northwestern Ontario.
Terry Young is a vice president with the Independent Electrical System Operator. He says the agency is aware of the emerging needs in the north, and forums like this help them get a picture of what needs to be done.
And so that's what we're trying to do, is get those perspectives so that, you know, as we work together in the future to meet electricity needs, we're incorporating that local input as well.
Adam Riley, TBT News.
Premier Doug Ford has laid out details of a new public transit plan for the Greater Toronto Area. It's a $28.5 billion plan that Ford calls the biggest investment in subways in Canadian history. Colin DeMello has details.
For transit riders in Toronto, this is the latest map for the future of the subway system. The Ford government unveiled a $28.5 billion transit expansion project, including the newly named Ontario Line.
In the map, you've seen a transit network that will get people moving. A transit network with subways at its core. Rapid underground transit. Transit that will connect community.
The Downtown Relief Line is being renamed and redesigned. The Ford government says it will now originate at the Ontario Science Centre, go south through Pape to Queen Street, and then west to Osgoode. Trains will then curve south, ending up at Ontario Place. The province is promising it can build the line faster and cheaper than the City of Toronto, coming in at nearly $11 billion. They anticipate it'll be built by 2027. Also changing as part of this transit plan is the Scarborough subway extension. The province is now promising to spend $5.6 billion and add 2 stops at Lawrence and Shepherd, taking it back to the original design under former Toronto Mayor Rob Ford.
The Matawa First Nations are rejecting the Ontario government's proposal to repeal the controversial Far North Act. The Matawa Chiefs Council says they oppose the current plans and say if the act is to be replaced by some other legislation, the Matawa communities must be involved in the decision-making framework. Meanwhile, the issue was also debated at Queen's Park today. Kiiwetinoong MPP Sol Mamakwa says while Northern First Nations want to benefit from resource extradition on their lands, they worry they won't be properly consulted if the province scraps the Far North Act. He asked the government to commit proper First Nations engagement before implementing any regulations to replace the act.
Many First Nations are concerned the minister is undermining the duty to consult when he refers to cutting red tape. Speaker, First Nations are not red tape.
I haven't met a First Nations leader in my extensive time living and working up there who liked anything about this act, Mr. Speaker. Designations of park status on some of their traditional lands and including some of their reservation lands, Mr. Speaker. This is completely unacceptable. It is put a stop to good business opportunities in Northern Ontario. Of course, First Nations communities, Mr. Speaker, ought to have, as my learned colleague said, every opportunity to develop the resources, participate in the economic activity, and see an improvement in the overall conditions, economic conditions and prospects in their communities moving forward. And that's exactly what we intend to deliver.
The effort to keep the Ojibwe language alive took another step forward today. A trio of organizations have come together to help provide students and educators in the Rainy River School District with proper resources. Ben Nesbitt has more.
Members of the Rainy River District School Board, Seven Generations Education Institute, and Say It First gathered to launch the Ojibwe language strategy, also known as Anishinaabe Moda. It looks to help families who want to teach their kids the traditional language, as well as students and teachers. Director of Education for the Rainy River District, Heather Campbell, says it's crucial to support the continuation of the Ojibwe language.
Students need their language. It's part of self-identity. It's also part of success. We've always made a commitment to the communities to provide Ojibwe language programming. It's a challenge. We only have one faculty of education, and we're truly grateful for that in Northwestern Ontario. But it certainly cannot replace the over half of Ojibwe teachers across the region that are set to retire within the next 5 years.
The founder of Say It First, Mike Parkhill, points out that keeping Indigenous peoples aligned with their culture is vital for mental health.
When we look at the Indigenous life without culture and without language, we see a suicide rate that's alarmingly high. There's direct correlation between not knowing the language, building self-identity, and substance abuse, truancy, gang activity. So this is a preemptive way to thwart all those social issues off.
The program is also featured in early childcare programs within the Rainy River District. Ben Nesbitt, TBT News.
An inquest has been announced into the death of a 25-year-old man here in the city. Emmanuel Orudamika died at the Thunder Bay Regional Hospital in February of 2014 after collapsing while in police custody 4 days earlier. An inquest is mandatory whenever a person dies while in custody. The inquest will examine the circumstances surrounding the death and give the jury a chance to make recommendations to prevent similar incidents in the future. Dates and location for the inquest have not yet been determined.
2 people from Southern Ontario are facing a long list of charges following a failed attempt to pass counterfeit currency in Scriber. OPP were called yesterday afternoon after a gas bar was given a fake American $100 bill. Video from the business helped police identify 2 suspects, and their vehicle was located a short time later. When apprehended, it was found that vehicle had been stolen. The suspects were also in possession of fake identification, stolen checks, more counterfeit cash, several weapons, and a quantity of methamphetamine and LSD. A 48-year-old man and a 25-year-old woman remain in custody.
27 years later, and the local school boards are still finding a way to bring farming into classrooms. The Pizza Project is taking over the CLE grounds again this week as hundreds of grade 3 students get to learn why pizza is good for them and where it comes from. Alana Pickrell was there and files this report.
The organizers of the Pizza Project have once again brought a slice of farming into the curriculum. Hundreds of grade 3 students from schools around the city are being bused to the CLE grounds where they are rotated through 8 different stations. The kids learn everything from what cows need to eat, how sausage is made, and why pizza is good for them.
I learned a lot of cool facts today. Like what? Like how to milk a cow, and also how cheese is made. And when I first got this plant's name is called Tiny Tim.
The hands-on educational event teaches children about food while having a strong focus on Thunder Bay and local ingredients. Marian Benka, who has been helping run the project since it first originated, says this is a very important learning opportunity.
They have no idea that food comes from other than boxes or restaurants or other places, and they need to know that there's a long chain prior to the way the food comes to them.
The day of learning at the CLE wasn't lost on the students. Many ran from station to station, excited about the knowledge they learned and ready for the next piece of information.
All of the things from pizza comes from farms. About a lot of vegetables and grains and what's in pizza.
The Pizza Project continues on Thursday with more schools taking part. And after nearly 3 decades of running this event, organizers say it has become a well-loved tradition among generations.
So I had my daughter actually go through this project a number of years ago now. But even since then, I see lots of kids. I have my nieces and nephews come through here, and all the teachers, again, say this is such a wonderful idea.
Over the course of Project Pizza, more than 600 grade 3 students will walk through the 8 stations and walk away with a new understanding of how food is produced and local agriculture. Alana Pickrell, TBT News.
It's like a whole lot of fun.